Hello, friends. Sorry about the late start, but we are live. Quite a bit to get into since last week's podcast. We really didn't get to get into a lot of current sports, so we're really looking to kick off today with a lot of sports talk. We won't be getting into as much current event stuff. I really want to wait until we have Aaron and maybe Alan back on the podcast because I think it's really important to have different thoughts on those kind of things to balance me out because I can get a little heated, a little passionate about this stuff, and I don't ever want to come off as, if I'm wrong, I want to be corrected in it, and I want to hear other people's thoughts on things before I give my thoughts, or at least at the same time, so I can make sure that I'm not talking out of my ass. But anyways, back into sports. Um, I did want to touch now that we're seeing some clarity on the NBA playoffs. I wanted to go over, where I was right and where I was wrong. I want to get this pulled up here. Live right now is Toronto and Boston going at it in the conference semis. Okay, so where I was wrong. Oh, ooh, that hurt. In the division series, where I was wrong, LA took care of Portland 4-1. I really did think that was going 7 games, but Portland banged up, probably a little worn out from their playoff run. The Lakers took care of Portland, no problems. The Rockets Oklahoma City Thunder series is still going on. Houston being up 3-2. I have that game going 7. I still think Oklahoma City forces a game 7. But I think Houston wins that series 4-3. I did have Oklahoma City winning that 4-3. Let's see here. Miami 4-0'd Indiana, which was really surprising. I had that 4-2 Miami. Miami is really looking good. I feel really bad for Milwaukee having to face Miami because that is a hot team. Honestly, and as things are standing right now, I have it Miami Toronto in the conference finals, where I think ultimately Toronto does win and move on. Um, let's see. Milwaukee 4-1 Orlando. I had that 4-2. I did think Milwaukee would drop 2 early on, but they came out with a gentleman sweep 4-1. Boston 4-0'd Philly. I had that 4-1 with Philly. I think that the 76ers have a huge offseason ahead of them. Brett Brown is out. They have to decide what to do with Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid. I think that you could get a really good haul for either one of them. And if you're going to take one out of the equation, I think the best thing to do is get both of them just because now you're starting to see injuries mount. And the last thing you want to do, in my opinion, is settle for mediocrity, which if you have one of those guys plus some pieces, I don't necessarily think that's enough firepower to compete with some of these teams that are coming up in the East. Toronto is going to continue to be good for a while, especially if they can keep that nucleus there together. I think Boston is going to be good for the next couple of years, and I think Miami as well. So you got 3 really good teams that you're going to be looking up at. The Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons experiment has not worked out, and it's a shame because I was so high on those guys. And to see that situation not work out there is really sad. So I think Philly's got a big offseason ahead of them. I think a lot of people have some questions to answer, rightfully so. Toronto 4-0'd Brooklyn. I had that 4-1. I thought Brooklyn was good enough to at least take one game off, but I think that is a testament to how strong Toronto is even after losing Kawhi Leonard. That's a team that might have won the NBA championship last year, even without Kawhi. You know, maybe with DeRozan there, that DeRozan does something similar. DeRozan's nowhere near the level of player that Kawhi is, but they're right back in the thick of things. a year removed. And Denver, Utah. Can't forget about them. I had that series going 7 games with Denver coming out on top. Um, I still think Denver forces a game 7, but I'm not convinced that Utah doesn't win one of the next two. And these playoffs have been not really all that exciting. We don't really have a whole lot of close series except for that Houston, Oklahoma City, and Denver, Utah. Which Denver, Utah is the most exciting series so far. Jamal Murray and Donovan Mitchell are really just duking it out there. It is a heavyweight fight for the ages. And that leads me in. We're getting closer to football starting. And I think I want to now start getting into our NFL preview. First, I want to go over Vegas win total odds for the season. Very interesting. You know, I don't agree with Vegas odds. I think that there's some teams on here that definitely are worth putting some money on. I think it's very in the middle is really where it gets hard, but at the top and the bottom, um, a little surprising. I want to start at the bottom. Jacksonville Jaguars 4.5 wins. I'm gonna take the under. I think even with Gardner Minshew playing out of his mind, I still think that they win maybe 3 games if they're lucky. Honestly, I think they're probably closer to a 1 or 2 win team. Playing in a difficult division in a difficult conference, they're gonna have their work cut out for them. The Washington Redskins 5 wins. I think that they are a year away from 5 wins. I think this year that they are a 2 or 3 win team. Team without and Washington Redskins, the Washington football team, they are a year away from even having 5 wins. They're another team that's probably a 2 or 3 win team, depending on how well Dwayne Haskins plays. I think Ron Rivera was a huge signing for that team. I think that he brings some legitimacy to a franchise that's really not had anything to hang their hat on for a while. So Ron Rivera is a big time signing, but they're still like a 2 or 3 win team. I think there will be a team looking at a quarterback in the next year's draft. I don't think they're a 5 win team, even with Ron Rivera turning some stuff around there. The Cincinnati Bengals 5.5 wins. I'm taking the under. Again, I think this is a 3 win team. I think even if Joe Burrow balls out, they're still playing in one of the toughest divisions, and that's a team that is not very talented. Aside from Geno Atkins and AJ Green, which is AJ Green going to be healthy? Is Joe Mixon going to be healthy? It's just a team that's not very good. They don't have very good offensive line. So I see Cincinnati maybe winning 3, maybe 4 games. So I'm taking the under on those. The Carolina Panthers 5.5 wins. I will take the over. I think they're at least a 6 win team, if not a sleeper playoff team. I think that what they've drafted there, they drafted all defense in the draft. All 7 picks were picked on defensive players. Picking up of why am I blanking on his name now? All of a sudden, it's all they've been talking about. We're gonna look this up. Teddy Bridgewater. Jesus. Teddy Bridgewater, I think, brings some legitimacy there. So I definitely think that's at least a 6 win team, if not maybe even an 8 or 9 win team. If things go their way, this year is definitely going to be an interesting one. I definitely think it's a possibility that a team like Carolina could sneak into the playoffs in a year like this year. Miami Dolphins 6 wins. I think that's pretty good. I think it's pretty close. I'm gonna take the under. I'd rather take the push. I think they are a 6 win team. But if I was to gamble, I'd say they'd be under. I still think they're a year away from all this talent they've been drafting to develop. I think that Tua is the real deal. I think that he was the best quarterback coming out of this draft, but he also has the biggest bust potential. He's left-handed. He's small, not as athletic as he thinks he is. And so, if Miami can build a line there, give this kid some time to throw the ball, I think Tua is a real deal. I had really wished the Chargers would have moved up to draft him instead of staying content with Herbert, because this league is about stars and playmakers, and especially now at quarterback, the quarterback position. You see some of the best quarterbacks in our league are freak athletes and playmakers. Pat Mahomes and Russell Wilson, Lamar Jackson. You need dynamicy. You need a dynamic player at the quarterback position, and I think Tua has dynamic written all over him. The New York Giants, 6.5 wins. I'm going to take the under. I'm not sold on Joe Judge. Definitely some weird things coming out of the Giants camp. I don't think they're a very talented team, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And I still think they're a year or two away from knocking at the playoff door. So I'm going to take the under. I think that they're like a 4 or 5 win team. The Detroit Lions, I think, and as we get further into NFL season previews, I'm really going to be harping on these Detroit Lions, man. I don't get the Matt Stafford hype. The guy can't stay healthy, and everyone, I think, overrates how good he is. He's definitely a guy that puts up numbers, but so did Phillip Rivers for a long time. And how many Super Bowls did he come out with? And we're talking about a Lions team that is lacking depth, lacking playmakers, lacking talent. So I'm going to take the under. I think the Lions are a 3-4 win team. I'm taking the under on that. The New York Jets, 7 wins. This is one that's going to be difficult. I think that they're playing in a weaker division now with the Patriots being gone. We saw Sam Darnold run off some wins at the end of last year when he came back from mono. So I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that they could win 8 games, but I also don't think that it's far-fetched to say that they could also win 5 games. So if I had to put money on it, I'm going to take the under, but I would not be surprised if they eked out 8 wins this year. The Raiders, 7.5 wins. If John Gruden thought that Derek Carr was his quarterback and believed in him the way he believes in Marcus Mariota, I think that 7.5 wins is going to be the under. I think they win more. I think they win 8 games. But for whatever reason, John Gruden just does not like Derek Carr. And because of that, I don't see how the Raiders do well this year. That he's infatuated with Marcus Mariota, who has shown us he's not a very good quarterback. And so, best case scenario, Derek Carr balls out, they make the playoffs. But the more likely scenario, which is worst case scenario, is Derek Carr goes 2-2, 3-3, frustrates the hell out of Gruden, and then they put in Marcus Mariota, who absolutely falls on his face, and then the team chemistry is just all fucked. So I'm gonna take the under on the Raiders. I think that this year is a very pivotal year. I think Gruden tries to find a quarterback this year or next year's draft, and I think that they win something closer to 5 or 6 games. The Arizona Cardinals, 7.5 is I'm going to take the under. I still think they're also a year away from contending. I thought that drafting Simmons was a play for the future because he's going to be, a Pro Bowl, All-Pro type player, but the impact he's going to make in year 1 is going to be minimal, considering that defense isn't very good. And so if they drafted a lineman, I think that help plays into his development, into Kyler Murray's development. But because they went with a defensive player, the line is still a problem. I think that you're going to see them struggle, and I think they win 6 games this year. And next year is the year we see them take the leap, depending on how they draft, depending on how they, develop this team. I don't think Cliff Kingsbury is the long-term answer there, but his job hinges on Kyler Murray's development. So I think that this year they get a pass, being in year 2. Next year is really the go time for them. The Houston Texans, 7.5 wins. I think that this team is on the verge of blowing up. I think that this year Bill O'Brien gets fired. I think they bring in someone in a last-ditch effort to keep Deshaun Watson there, because I think Deshaun Watson, if he's being honest, wants out. If I'm Deshaun Watson, I want out. You just got rid of DeAndre Hopkins, and you brought in Randall Cobb and Brandon Cooks. I don't know what Bill O'Brien's thinking there. As a coach, he's not that bad, but as a coach GM, absolutely terrible. Absolutely terrible. Please get Bill O'Brien out of Texas. Atlanta Falcons, 7.5 wins. I take the under, man. I don't think the Falcons are uh, as good as people think they are. I think they're closer to a 7-win team. They're playing in a tougher division with Tom Brady coming to town. Carolina's better. The Saints are still the Saints. I think the Saints this year drop off a cliff. I think this is the year we finally see, all these years of almost catch up to them. And I think the Falcons are just not a very good team. The Chargers 7.5 wins. This is also one that could go either way. A lot of what happens here hinges on Tyrod Taylor and probably eventually Justin Herbert. I think Tyrod Taylor is good enough to lead this team to a 10-win season, but I also think he's enough of a wild card that the Chargers could end up with 4 wins. Especially if he falters early on, they go 1-3, 1-4. They throw in Herbert. Herbert wins, 3 of the last 10 games. Which would be a shame because this is such a talented team, and the question mark is at quarterback. I still think that they made a mistake not going in and getting Tua. I think that you throw him in there with those athletic playmakers and Mike Williams and Keenan Allen, letting Austin Eckler do his thing out of the backfield, Hunter Henry over the middle. That was a really good team. It is a really good team with a really good defense, really good defensive backs. Joey Bosa locked up for a couple years. Melvin Ingram back from his holdout. I think Tua is something that would have at least given them a shot this year. I think the combination of Tyrod Taylor and Justin Herbert, I think that if Tyrod Taylor balls out, they can make the playoffs. But if he falters, Justin Herbert's not ready this year. And I think maybe it's next year that you start to see the Chargers looking back at the playoffs again. The Denver Broncos, 8 wins. Now, this is another one. I think that's probably right where they finish. I think they're an 8-win team. But they have enough talent that they definitely could be a 10-win team and make the playoffs. I think that the West is going to be a really tight division for the next 5 to 7 years, with the Chargers getting better, drafting a quarterback of the future. The Raiders right on the cusp of their quarterback away from John Gruden's, game plan finally materializing. And then the Super Bowl champs, Kansas City Chiefs. That's a tough division. All those teams are getting good right at the same time. The Chicago Bears, 8 wins. Wrong. I think the Chicago Bears are like a 5-win team. No joke, man. They bring in Nick Foles. I don't think they even know yet who's going to be their quarterback in Nick Foles or Mitch Trubisky. I think Mitch Trubisky wins his job back. Even if he loses, I think he wins it back because this is finally some motivation to get him, moving in the right direction. But they're a 5-win team, man. How sad that this train is derailed on Mitchell Trubisky's lack of development. Year 2, they ball out, make the playoffs, and they think they're on the rise, so they trade 2 first-round picks for Khalil Mack, and then Mitchell Trubisky falls on his face. It's a shame, man. It really looked like the Bears were cooking something up, and now they're looking like a 5-win team. The Los Angeles Rams, 8 wins. That's probably pretty accurate. I think they're like a 6-7-win team. I don't think they're very good. I don't think Jared Goff was worth the money they signed him to, but you had to. You didn't have a choice. You've traded Brandon Cooks. You've traded future assets for Jalen Ramsey. They're in a tough division. Arizona's better. San Francisco is, largely intact from their team from last year. And Seattle is still Seattle. So the Rams are in a rough place. They went all in for Super Bowl and came out with 0. The Cleveland Browns, 8 wins. I think that they're a 9-win team. I think they win 9 games, and I think they make the playoffs. This is a very pivotal year for Baker Mayfield. He's really got to prove his doubters wrong. He knows his decision making and conditioning last year were not up to par. I think that riding off that high from his rookie season. You know, he kind of coasted into year 2, and they didn't have the offensive line for him to coast. They didn't have the head coach for him to coast, and so they needed him to step up and pick up the slack. Now, for his long-term development, it was good that they fell flat last year because it got Joe Kitchens out of there. If Baker Mayfield balls out, out of his mind, and they make the playoffs last year, Freddie Kitchens is still the head coach, and that, you weren't winning a Super Bowl with Freddie Kitchens as your head coach. Sorry, Freddie Kitchens. I'm sure you're a wonderful guy, but you were not winning a Super Bowl in Cleveland with that guy. The Tennessee Titans, 8.5 wins. I think that they're a 9 or 10 win team in the South. The Colts are going to be good, but the Texans, I think, are going to fall flat. Jacksonville is going to be terrible. I think the Titans win 9 or 10 games. I think they're the ones that win that division, but the Colts could either be a 10 to 12 win team, or they could be a 5-win team. The Titans, I think, with Derrick Henry and Ryan Tannehill locked up and a really good team around them, I think that they just run, pound the rock. Don't rely on Tannehill to have to air it out, 30 times a game, and they'll be fine. Minnesota Vikings, 9 wins. I think that is pretty low. I think they are a 10 or 11 win team. I don't think Green Bay's any better than they were last year. If anything, there's more turmoil. The Chicago Bears are not going to be an 8-win team. They're going to be closer to a 5-win team. And that leaves one other team in their division. Who am I forgetting? The Lions. The Lions are garbage, man. They are not winning 5 games. They're not winning 6.5 games. They're winning like 3 games. So the Minnesota Vikings are a 10 or 11 win team, and I think they win that division. The Colts is a 9-win team. If I'm on betting man, I'm taking the over. I think that with Frank Reich, Phillip Rivers, and a really good offensive line, I think that they could win 12 games, but I could very easily see them winning 5 because I think Phillip Rivers is shot. When you're relying on him to throw the ball, especially in crunch time, he's not that guy. He's definitely a guy that you give the ball early, let him air it out, let him give you a lead, and then you coast on that. This guy has not proven, at least not in recent years, that he can come up big in clutch moments. So I think that they're going to be in a lot of tight games, and I don't think he's the quarterback for that. The Seattle Seahawks, 9 wins. I think that's pretty accurate. I know some other pages, some other networks have them being like an 11 or 12 win team. They're not very good. They're going to be relying on Russell Wilson and Jamal Adams to bail them out of some games. And last year, Russell Wilson did bail them out of a lot of games they probably should have lost. And I don't think you can count on Magic striking 2 years in a row. History has proven that you can't. But I think it's very interesting what they're trying to build there, where Russell Wilson is your playmaker on offense and Jamal Adams your playmaker on defense, and relying on those two guys to create some magic. So I'm optimistic for Seattle, but I'm not betting on them to win more than 9 games next year. I still think they win 9, make the playoffs. Green Bay at 9 wins. That's probably pretty accurate. They probably do win 9 games, but I'm concerned with what they've got going on there, drafting Jordan Love. The writing's on the wall for Aaron Rodgers. If he plays poorly, he gets himself out of that. They trade him this next season, and I think he would rather that. I think he would rather go play for the team he's going to be playing for next year rather than make the playoffs, make an NFC championship game, and maybe have to stay there another one last year, the following year. So wouldn't surprise me if Aaron Rodgers decides to just phone it in this season to get the hell out of there. I don't think he wants to be there anymore. I think if he had it his way, he'd be gone right now. The Buffalo Bills, 9 wins. I'll take the over. I think they win that division at 10 or 11 games. They still have an excellent defense. Josh Allen gets another year to develop. They now have Stephon Diggs. So that's a really good team. I think they're more like a 10 or 11 win team. And I think they win that division with that record. The Steelers, 9.5 wins. I'm going to take the under. Ben's coming back from major elbow surgery to a team that, is very good around him, but he is the key. And the quarterback is your key, but he is the key to that team's win total this year. And I just don't see him being the quarterback that leads them to 9.5 wins. I'm going to take the under at 8 wins. I think they're an 8-8 team with him, and I think that they look for a quarterback next year. I really thought they should have brought Cam in as their backup and give him a chance after Ben, goes 2-4 in his first 6 games. Philadelphia Eagles 9.5. This 100% hinges on Carson Wentz and his wide receiving core. If the wide receivers hold up, which they're without Chris Godwin, the guy they just got from the Niners, he is opted out of this season already. That is a big blow to a team that was really needing to shore up its wide receiving core. If Carson Wentz balls out, stays healthy, and that wide receiving core just plays average, they're an 11-12 win team and they win that division. If they don't, they're a 9-7, 8-8 team that probably still makes the playoffs, probably still takes a game in the divisional round, but not much more. Everything hinges on that wide receiving core. Here's one of my biggest surprises: the New England Patriots at 9.5 wins. The team is lacking offensive talent. They still have a good defense. I still expect that defense to be a top 5 defense, but they've had a ton of players opt out, which I don't think Bill Belichick has a problem with. I think the secret plan is to be competitive, to play with a mobile quarterback, because I think that they know they're getting an athletic quarterback in next year's draft one way or another, whether it's Trey Lance, Justin Fields, or Trevor Lawrence. So I think Belichick wants to see what he has to do with that new play style. And so I think the Cam Newton signing was very much indicative of what the Patriots know they're going to be dealing with next year. Best case scenario, Cam Newton balls out, they make the playoffs, they make a little run, feels good for everyone. Worst case scenario is and actually in my opinion that's the worst case, but worst case scenario is, Cam Newton leads them to a 5-11 record, and they're picking high in a draft with 3 really good quarterbacks coming up. So I think that they're closer to 5-11 than they are 9-7. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers 9.5 wins. Now here's a tough one, because that's a really good team. They just added a very motivated Tom Brady who's looking to go out and prove himself to the world. I think that they very easily could go 12-4. I think they could easily go 9-7. I don't think they're worse than 9-7. So if I'm taking the over under, I'm taking the over. I'll bet on the over. But they're playing in a tough division. Carolina's better. Atlanta's still Atlanta. They're still a wild card. They can compete with the best, and they can fall to the worst. So I've got Tampa Bay. I think that they're at least a 10-win team. I think that if they really ball out like I think they're going to, I think they're a 12-win team and win that division. The Dallas Cowboys, 10 wins. Another one. If I'm betting money, I'm betting that this team goes 8-8. Mike McCarthy, I don't think is as good of a coach as people think he is. I know that he has a lot of respect. I know that Aaron Rodgers played a big part in the breakup there, but just like I think Phillip Rivers is a shot quarterback, I think Mike McCarthy is a shot head coach. I think that Dak has a lot to prove this year. Lower body soft tissue injury day to day. No joke. Is that real, or are you just fucking with me, Streets? Because if that's true, holy crap, man! Like already. And I was talking about that last week. We didn't. Oh, that's horrible. I was talking about last week about how injuries are really stacking up in the NFL, and you always have them. And I know we have slow sports movement right now, stories movement. So, these injuries are being magnified because it's really all we have to talk about. Limited reps for us training camp, yeah, and you have to take that carefully with Wentz. You need him to be healthy, even if he has to sit out games to stay healthy. If you have to do some sort of load management, you have a good backup in Jalen Hurts. I do believe in Jalen Hurts, especially in that system with Doug Peterson. I think that that Peterson can at least break even in games that Jalen Hurts has to start. So getting and keeping Carson Wentz healthy is the key. And I think that even if he has to sit out, a portion of the season, a third of the season, I still think they're in good hands because of what they have built there. It's just a shame that injuries and underperforming has plagued Philadelphia the way it has the last couple of years. From Carson Wentz's first major injury in the year that they won the Super Bowl to now, it's just been a series of unfortunate events for them. But I still believe in that system. I really hope that it doesn't cost Doug Peterson his job. I don't think it will. I think they believe in him there. But I always wonder, is this bad luck with these teams, or is it indicative of the strength and conditioning departments, portions of these teams? If I'm the president of operations there, I'm looking into that. Do we need better strength and conditioning? Do we need a better medical staff that identifies these things? What is it that is costing us injuries year in and year out, and the ability to compete year in and year out? So if I'm, it has to be, right. Like that's the common denominator. The players have come and go, but injuries and underperforming has stayed consistent. Yeah, you have to. Even if you love the guys, I think that some of the most legendary coaches and general managers and presidents had to make the toughest decisions. When Philly let go of Eric Reed, I think that was probably one of the hardest things they ever had to do as an organization, was say goodbye to Andy Reid. I think that was one of the hardest things they ever had to do, because I think they still believed in him and they knew he was a good coach. But at a certain point, you have to do something about these kind of situations, whether it's underperforming or players getting hurt. And so, like you said, you have to, when year in and year out, you have players getting hurt and underperforming, you have to look at the common denominator. And especially in a sport like football, where there's a lot of player movement at the bottom of the roster, and more so the bottom half of the roster, there's one common denominator, and that's your medical staff and your training staff and your assistants. These they really do need to do something, shake something up in Philly, because whether it's just bad luck on their part, you have to do something. And I've always felt that way. When something's not working, even if you believe in it, even like in Philly, I believed in what the 76ers were doing there, and this season and this playoff has just reaffirmed that something needs to be done there. Firing Coach Brown was the first step. As much as they might have liked him, yeah, right. Hire the same personnel staff that the Tom Brady uses, right? I mean, he's had one major injury in his entire career, and that could be chalked up as a fluke, because that stuff happens. Phillip Rivers had it happen. Adrian Peterson had it happen. So, I've always been a believer of that. I look at baseball. You look at teams that stay healthy, or pitching coaches that turn around a pitching staff. It's like, I'm paying that guy whatever he wants. I'll pay my pitching coach more than my manager makes, because I think a good pitching coach is more valuable than your manager in baseball. And in football, whatever aspect of life I'm in sports, whether it's football, baseball, basketball, I want to go get the best coaching, the best medical staff, the best trainers. I want all of them, because to me, that's where you win Super Bowls. That's where you win, football games. Oh, well, imagine if Andrew Luck's in any different situation with the line. Imagine if Andrew Luck had been in Dak Prescott's shoes, where he comes into the league with the best offensive line. Andrew Luck has probably won 2 or 3 Super Bowls right now in Dallas if he had gone into the situation that Dak Prescott went into. Or if Andrew Luck's coming out of football now with the Colts' current offensive line, Andrew Luck's probably already won a Super Bowl, and he's not even thinking about retirement because he's not as banged up. What Andrew Luck had to go through in Indianapolis is an absolute travesty. And for a guy at 30 years old, in the prime of his career, to have to hang it up because he just doesn't think he can physically take it anymore is an absolute shame. And for everyone out there shitting on Andrew Luck for retiring, I urge you to go get yourselves into a couple car accidents and then see if you still want to get into a couple more car accidents. I have no problem with Andrew Luck stepping away for his own health. That game is brutal, and he was absolutely murdered for the first, couple years of his career there. It's an absolute shame. Let's see, where were we? So Dallas Cowboys 10 wins. I have the under. I think that they're more an 8-8 team. The New Orleans Saints 10 wins. I think they're another team that falls this year. Yeah, yeah. When Tiki walked away, and he was a running back too, and so the abuse he took was, in my opinion, is even magnified. And he played in a time where and the NFL was putting out hardest hits videos, and Tiki Barber was taking dudes leaving their feet to tackle him. And so, yeah, I have no problem with any of these NFL players stepping away. We saw Chris Borland a couple years ago retire after his rookie season with the Niners. Who was did Luke Kuechly just retire? I think Luke Kuechly just retired. A great middle linebacker, probably one of the best defensive players in football. We saw Patrick Willis for the Niners retire at 30. And I think a lot of people thought he still had some left in the tank. So any of these guys retiring, I have no problem with it. Football is such a brutal sport, even now where they're doing a lot to try and help with player safety. I have no problem with guys walking away. New Orleans Saints 10 wins. I think this is the year New Orleans falls on its face. I think that 3 or 4 years of almost making it, what ifs, just finally catches up, man. What that does mentally to a team, to an organization. Not to mention Drew Brees has had trouble staying healthy, and a lot hinges on the Drew Brees Taysom Hill tandem, because if Drew Brees misses time, Teddy Bridgewater's not there, and I don't think Jameis Winston is the answer. And you saw Jameis Winston with a legendary head coach last year not be able to make it happen. So even with Sean Payton in his offensive mind, Jameis Winston's not the answer. So I think ultimately it's Drew Brees and Taysom Hill. And Taysom Hill is not a quarterback, man. He is a Swiss Army knife, and that is where his value lies. If Drew Brees, for whatever reason, goes down for the season or retires, if Taysom Hill is your quarterback of the future, you're in trouble. Unless you're going to utilize him in a Swiss Army knife role, even as your main quarterback. I don't see it. I think the Saints go 9-7, 8-8 this year, so I'll take the under on the 10 wins. The 49ers 10.5 wins. I think at first when I saw that, I'm like, man, that's low. But they also have the 4th hardest schedule this year. Only the Dolphins, Jets, and Patriots have a tougher schedule this year. So San Francisco, had I not known what their schedule was, I'd probably say that 10.5 wins is low. I still think it's low. I still think that they're an 11 or 12 win team, just because I think that running back what they had last year, especially what they were running off at the end of the year, this running back by committee. They still have an amazing defense, and Kyle Shanahan's still probably the best offensive mind in football right now. So I still think they're an 11, 12 win team. I take the over on the 10.5 wins. Baltimore Ravens 11.5 wins. I'll take the over. I think this is a 14 win team, if not possibly a 15 win team. I'm never going to predict a team go 16-0 because I just don't think that is realistic. Not in today's football, not in this year that we're going to be playing under. If they went undefeated, it wouldn't surprise me. But Baltimore, I'm not worried about them in the regular season. I think they're built for the regular season. Where my doubt comes in is in the playoffs, because everything rests on Lamar Jackson. Everything rides on him and his effectiveness. And if they face a really good defensive team in the playoffs that just, has the answer for him, it doesn't matter how many regular season games they win. They have to win the most important. They have to win 3 of the most important games of the season. So I'm going to take the over. I think that they're a 14-win team. And that brings me to the Kansas City Chiefs They're also listed at 11.5 wins by Vegas. I am curious what their strength of schedule looks like. They're in the middle. They're tied for 18, so they're right smack dab in the middle. Their opponent's win percentage is 500. They're playing in a tougher division. They're playing in a conference that's getting better, with really good defenses. I think they're a 12-win team, but I think that they definitely have the work cut out for them this year, with a better conference. So I'll take the over. I think that they're a 12-win team, and I do think that they repeat as Super Bowl champs. They've largely kept what they have intact. I haven't heard, they did lose Damian Williams, I think, to opting out, but they drafted a running back, if I'm not mistaken, in the first round, who a lot of people are really high on. So, I'm not as worried about Damian Williams opting out as I am a lineman. I can't remember if the Chiefs were a team that lost a lineman. That's the teams that I'm worried about, is teams that have lost linemen. I think the Broncos lost their left tackle to either injury or opt out. And for a team like Denver that's on the up and up, the biggest blow to a team other than the quarterback is your left tackle. So, any of these teams down a left tackle, I don't see making it to the big game. I think the strength of schedule this year was really interesting. The AFC East really got shafted. New England, the Jets, Miami, and Buffalo make up the top five, or 4 out of the top 5. The NFC East also, or NFC West also has it roughed. The teams with the easiest schedule, Baltimore ended up with the easiest strength of schedule, followed by Pittsburgh, Dallas, Cleveland, Washington. Now, some of these teams, Washington, Cincinnati, New York, they ended up with some pretty easy schedules. I don't think it matters for those teams. I don't think they're very good. So I don't put a whole lot of stock into that. And we'll wrap up this episode with my player highlight, which I do want to experiment with something. When I can get Streets on. Let's see if this works. All right, that's close enough. How do we... 11? There we go. So today's player highlight is Shoeless Joe Jackson. Our last two were Tony Gwynn, Reggie Jackson, and Satchel Paige, last 3. This week's was Shoeless Joe Jackson, a guy I grew up following. Uh-oh, that's not right. That's not right. Hold on. Okay, we're not going to be right back because we're here. Shoeless Joe Jackson is infamous for his involvement in the Chicago Black Sox scandal of the 1919 World Series. For those of you who aren't aware, there's a really good movie out there on the Chicago Black Sox scandal of 1919 World Series called 8 Men Out. I grew up watching that movie over and over and over again. I know it's portrayed from the side of the players, but I think history shows that it's probably the more accurate representation of what happened. Can we make this even bigger, I wonder? Hey, there we go. There we go. Shoeless Joe Jackson, even though he balled out in the 1919 World Series, he was still banned from baseball for his involvement. The story goes that he was offered $5,000 twice. In the movie, I believe he agrees to accept it, but he never actually could bring himself to throw the World Series, and so he just balled out through it. In the movie, I believe he gave the money back because he couldn't bring himself to do it. He was a ball player, and even though he was being dicked over by the Chicago White Sox owner, all those players were. He was offered, for just to throw the World Series, offered twice what his salary was for the year. And when he was banned in his prime, because he was in his prime, I believe. Let's see, that was 1919. He was born in 1880, so that would have put him at like 30 years old. Is my math right there? Yeah, 29 years old. He ended up playing under some fake names in Southern baseball. In 1911, he hit 408 as a rookie, which is still a rookie record. Sixth highest single season batting average. And he is the owner of the third highest lifetime average. Um, Going back to his childhood, he almost died from measles at 10 years old. So we know we don't have the story of Shoeless Joe Jackson. If he dies from measles at 10. At 6 to 7 years old, he had to work 12-hour shifts at the textile mill to help his family financially, which nobody has to do these days. These not in America at least. Child labor laws prevent it, but we're talking about a 100 years ago. And it's crazy to think 100 years ago, kids were having to work 12-hour shifts at 6, 7 years old to help their families out financially. So I think it is definitely a testament to how blessed we are nowadays. But at 13 years old, his mother was approached by the textile mill's owner for Joe Jackson to play on their baseball team. And originally, as a pitcher, he actually broke someone's arm pitching the ball, and he was moved to the outfield because none of the players wanted to bat against him. And by the time he was 15 years old, he had joined semi-pro teams. The legend of Shoeless Joe Jackson. There's two different stories out there, both of which he played without his shoes on because his feet hurt so bad, earning himself the nickname Shoeless Joe Jackson. It's a shame how that went out. He was because he had to work at the textile mill from ages 6 to 13. School was a luxury that they could not afford, so he grew up very illiterate and actually had to have his wife sign a lot of his autographs. And at restaurants, rather than have someone read out the menu to him, he would wait and have all his teammates order and then order something he had heard. So the adversity that some of these guys had to face back in the day is stuff that would break a lot of people nowadays. A big testament to what kind of a man he was and fought through. And it's definitely a shame that even with all the evidence and all the testimony that he was really screwed over in the Black Sox scandal, was represented by the team's lawyer, which was a huge conflict of interest that would never happen in today's day. But because he was illiterate, was really taken advantage of during that whole scandal and robbed us of, what would have been another 10 years of Shoeless Joe Jackson, with a lot of that being prime Joe Jackson. Babe Ruth was known to have tried to emulate Shoeless Joe Jackson's hitting approach, and Babe Ruth is one of, if not the greatest baseball player of all time. And so that is going to conclude this week's episode. Next week we should have the gang back, and so we will be talking about a little bit more social justice and current events, which I'm really excited to get into. Alan being Hispanic, Aaron being black, we get a lot of different viewpoints from all of this, and I think it's important to hear. You can hear me talk about social injustice and things, but as a white person, I don't have the same experiences or viewpoint as people of color, minorities. So I think it's important that me as a white person, not just sitting up here ranting about my opinions on all this shit. We do need to hear from our nation, which is made up of all kinds of people, myself being European and Hispanic, Alan being Salvadorian. I think he's Salvadorian. And Aaron being, black and white. This is what this country is made of. We are not all white, all black, all Mexican. At this point, most people are not pure anything. We are all a collection of different races and different ethnicities, and it's important to remember that, and especially considering, and probably 100 years from now, you won't see anybody that can claim, oh yeah, I'm all white, I'm all black, I'm all whatever, and so the farther we get away from, the farther we get towards, mixed genetics, the farther we get away from racism, because eventually it'll come a day where, the last white supremacist dies off, the last pure white, the last, pure black, pure Mexican. That day is coming, and it's important for the growth of this world that we get as far away from that as possible. And with cultures intermingling, with our children being mixed and growing up in mixed homes, mixed cultures, it's only going to prove beneficial when we have children being raised in a world where prejudice is dying, or eventually one day dead. There'll always be it, but when we can get away from allowing that to divide us as people, is when this world can really grow. When we as a race, the human race, grow. So looking forward to next week's podcast, and looking forward to see how these NBA playoffs shake out. Looking forward to seeing the NFL start up, and then baseball playoffs starting in like a month and a half now. So bid you all farewell. Everyone, please stay safe. Please stop trying to fight with your neighbors. Go to Walmart, get your shit, get out, wear a mask. Let's just get through this. And as always, remember, we're all in this together.